Good morning, our viewers. Welcome to the 28th episode of Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanjee. We have a very distinguished guest today and a very important and serious topic to discuss. Our guest today is Ambassador Veena Sikri. She has been a practitioner of diplomacy as well as an academic. She was professor of diplomacy at Awami League University after retirement from IFS. She has the unique distinction of being High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh, and she is very deeply involved with day-to-day happenings in Bangladesh politics. I'm also proud to say that she serves as a member of the International Advisory Board of the Council for Strategic Affairs. So it's a pleasure to welcome Ambassador Veena Sikri. Ma'am, welcome to our platform.
Thank you.
The topic for today was, is there foreign interference in Bangladesh? And before we could go through the scheduling issue, things actually took a different turn. And here we are. So possibly there's no point actually in recouping the events that have happened since January 2024, general elections in Bangladesh. But looking at the whole scenario and where we are, ma'am, do you have any opening comments on this situation?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me to your program. It's always a pleasure to be with you and be with the CSA. Yes, we are facing a very difficult position in Bangladesh right now. And if you like, I would like to go into the background of the situation a little bit. Of course, we do know that yesterday it came to a real climax and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned and left the country. But we need to look at the issue of the students' quota reform movement and the whole issue that has started this, because there's a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding about this issue. And it's as if what is being presented is that as if Sheikh Hasina government opposed the quota reform movement, and because of this opposition to her, that the students came up in revolt, and that's what ended. But I would like to present the case very differently. Students in Bangladesh have a very special position. They're very active, they're dynamic, they're opinion holders, they're very dynamic participants in the political process, and it's always been like that. In 1971, when Bangladesh Liberation War was on, the students were almost the first target, because they were the ones who were leading the fight for the liberation of Bangladesh and for freedom from Pakistan, what they used to call as occupation and colonialism. So on 25th March 71, when Yahya Khan broke off the talks with Sheikh Mujib and returned to West Pakistan and told the Pakistan army in Bangladesh to start this operation, which is called Operation Searchlight, a kind of a genocidal operation attack against the people of Bangladesh. The first target of that group was twofold. First, to arrest Sheikh Mujib and take him to West Pakistan, and second, to attack the students in Dhaka University. So, this is, the intellectuals, the students, the liberal-minded people who had been spearheading the movement for a separate Bangladesh. Now, so the students are very well aware, they're patriotic, they're sincere, and it was the children of these students who had got the reservation for, in the civil service and in the public sector undertakings, 30% reservation, which over the years added to others had gone up to a total of 56% reservation. But in 2018, coming now right to 2018, the students of Dhaka University and others again rose in protest. This time they asked the government, Sheikh Hasina was the prime minister at that time in 2018. They asked the government to have a quota reform, and they said, we can't live with this high quota. Sheikh Hasina herself supported the students, and she abolished the quota. So actually, for 6 years, between 2018 and 2024, there was no quota. So actually, there's been no problem at all. In June of this year, 2 months ago, there was an appeal filed in the High Court on this matter. And asking, in fact, to restore the quota. And the High Court accepted that request and restored the quota. But Sheikh Hasina's government went in appeal to the Supreme Court. So again, she said, I want a review. I'm prepared to abolish the entire quota system. And when she went in review to the Supreme Court, some students groups joined her in that appeal. So actually, that appeal in the Supreme Court was by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government and some student groups who had, of course, their own separate lawyer. And that Supreme Court decision came on the 21st of July. And they, of course, completely reduced the quota. They said we'll give only 5% for children of freedom fighters and 2% for others. So a total of just 7%. With that, actually, the quota reform movement's demands had come to an end, because that was the end of that. In fact, some of the students groups said they would put a moratorium on their protest, but they had some demands with Sheikh Hasina's government, because in the meanwhile they'd been firing, students had lost their lives, and Sheikh Hasina had come on television appealing for calm and saying she will have a judicial inquiry into the whole thing. So on 21st July, with the moratorium on the students' protest, they put a list of demands. But I would like to say what happened in between. I think that first of all, even on 5th of June this year, when the students restarted their protest, it was very peaceful, non-violent, absolutely no problem. This continued right till the middle of July, about a fortnight ago. And you had in a press conference, when Sheikh Hasina mentioned, somebody asked her about the students' reservations. She said, yes, I have myself supported the students. I do not want reservations. But in any case, reservations will be given for children of the Razakars, which is the people who opposed the liberation war and the struggle against Pakistan. And she said, of course, we'll give the reservation for those children, not for the children of Razakars. The Razakars are the people who opposed the liberation war. And with that, there was a kind of a turmoil with the students, and the Awami League students wing came into the picture. Short point being that because of this, uh, all the political student wings, the Awami League student wing is Chhatra League, the Jamaat-e-Islami student wing is Shibir, Islami Chhatra Shibir, and there's a BNP student wing. So all these three got into the act. The students' protest was hijacked by this politicization of the whole protest, and it got from bad to worse, became completely uncontrollable. But to show that it has been hijacked by these other elements, 2 days ago in Bangladesh, in the very reputed paper Daily Star of Bangladesh, there was a report that how many students had died up to then. Of course, since then, more people have died, because there was protests for the last 2 days as well, before the curfew was imposed again. And the Daily Star said that 204 students had died till the end of last week. Out of those 204, 53 were students. The rest were political participants, police keeping officials, law and order people, civilians, bystanders, and so on. So my point is that first we have to understand what is it that caused this unrest, as a result of which it escalated to such an extent that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had to resign and flee the country. There were elements which got into it, with the students' wings of political parties being a big one. And yesterday, it was amazing that as former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was leaving the country, the visuals you were seeing on Bangladesh television was of people, I will not call them students anymore, protesters maybe, but certainly not students. They were destroying the statue of Sheikh Mujib, who is the father of the nation, and every student, reveres him. You may have differences with his daughter, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, with anybody else, but people have great regard and respect for Sheikh Mujib, because he's the one who guided the country on all these issues. And they were destroying his statue. They pulled it down. They burnt his house where he lived and where he was assassinated. They ransacked Gana Bhavan, which is the official residence and office of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, of the prime minister, all prime ministers, is the official residence of all prime ministers. So it has been very anarchic, and it is worrisome that who was behind it? Why did it get out of control like that?
So, ma'am, you have rightly said that it may have been students to begin with. The agitation was hijacked by other political elements. And if one sees the visuals, These are not just political elements, they are criminal and lumpen elements of the society. Because
That's
I
right.
myself saw visuals in which the PM's house was being ransacked, looting was done. And I'm very sorry to say that female undergarments were being displayed as trophies of its quote unquote victory. So that does tell you what is going on. Ma'am, you mentioned a couple of times that Sheikh Hasina resigned. Is it that she resigned or there was a diktat from the army to resign? Because the sources said she was given 45 minutes to leave the country if she wanted her safety. She was not allowed to record a message to the nation.
Yes, that is true. That information is coming out quite clearly from Dhaka. That in the end, when these lumpen elements, the political parties, student wings, all these people got into the act and real violence was being created, then she had called in the army, and the army had helped her to control the situation. But in the last 2 days, even the people participating in the protests uh, had actually decided to break all police cordon, and they did. And on, I think, Sunday or Monday, there were about 300,000 people all over Dhaka. That is when the ransacking took place of the Gana Bhavan and all those situations. And at that time, the army, decided that they would not like to continue to shoot at the students, at the protesters. They would like to continue, because then people would die, innocent people would die, the anger would come on the army. I think this crisis situation, because it became completely out of control, now I think there's a lot more research that needs to be done to get into it as to how did it come to this situation. There are people talking about a section of the army being supporters of Jamaat-e-Islami, very strong supporters of Jamaat-e-Islami. There's talk about the Pakistan links between Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan and Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh. There's talk about China coming into it, because Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had gone to China just in July. In fact, it was that press conference that I spoke about was actually the one that she normally gives when she returns from a foreign visit. And this was that press conference when she came back from China. That had not been a good visit. And she had to return a day early because she was very upset that she was not given the protocol reception, the protocol treatment, the meeting with President Xi Jinping, the request for economic assistance was turned down. So there was a complete change in China's traditional attitude towards Bangladesh and towards Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, promising, they had always been promising a lot of help, we'll be a friend. President Xi Jinping had visited Dhaka in 2016 when Prime Minister was Sheikh Hasina. So all that had happened. So this was a big shock that when she plans her visit there, this happens. Now, why did China do it? Why did this happen? You don't invite somebody to your home and do it like this. You don't then suddenly change your mind about everything that you were going to do with your revered guest. And perhaps this was always in the offing, this situation that happened in the last 2 days. So there is, even if you look at the history of students' protests all over the world, when students' protests take place, if they're not supported by anybody else, they normally peter out. The students have a dialogue with the government, they give their demands, some are accepted, some are not accepted, and the whole issue peters out. But wherever you have seen a students' protest supported by political parties, one or the other political party, then there is complete havoc, and then there is complete one doesn't know where it will stop and what will happen. And this is exactly what happened in Dhaka, I think. Of course, a lot of details will emerge, I'm sure, as the days go by.
Coming to Jamaat-e-Islami connection to this agitation, there are, I mean, Jamaat-e-Islami was a banned organization in Bangladesh, and there are sources that are saying that Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel laureate and chairperson of the Grameen Bank, is somehow involved with both BNP and Jamaat-e-Islami, and is one of the quote unquote intellectual forces behind this agitation. Any comments on that?
Um, well, I think to recall a little bit of history here, in 2007 and 8 in Bangladesh, there was an army-backed caretaker government for 2 years. This was at the end of Prime Minister Begum Khalda Zia's term, because her term ended in 2006, and there should have been a normal caretaker government with a certain, the immediately past president, Supreme Court Chief Justice. But the Begum Khalda Zia had decided to tweak the system that by changing the retirement age of judges, and so she wanted to get somebody whom of her preference to become the head of the caretaker government. This created complete political chaos in Bangladesh, and it in fact was the beginning of the start that led eventually to the end of the caretaker government system, and that has been formally ended. But at that time, in 2006, when the chaos happened, because Awami League others objected to what Begum Khalida Zia had done. At that time, there was an army-backed caretaker government that came into being, and Professor Dr. Muhammad Yunus's name was at the top. At that time, what was in vogue was what they called the -2 formula. You need not have any of the two ladies. Don't have Begum Khalida Zia, don't have Sheikh Hasina, let's have somebody else. I mean, I think it's a very male chauvinist approach, but anyway. So there was big talk of Professor Dr. Muhammad Yunus being there, in fact, being the next prime minister. And he even started his own political party. And but he had no takers at all. There were absolutely no takers. And within 3 months, he completely abandoned it and said he would no longer join politics. And in fact, he said, I'm giving up the world of politics. And now he's back in politics again. Um, at that time, the support that was being seen for Professor Dr. Muhammad Yunus was from the West. It was, the Secretary of State at the time, I think it was Hillary Clinton had been Secretary of State for some time at that time, and there was a lot of support for him from the Western quarters. So this time, whether it's a combination, and his name has come up today, we've seen visuals of certain students groups saying, "No, we want only him." But the very fact that no name has been announced as yet, that means there's some kind of a difference of opinion within Bangladesh, which has not yet been resolved. And maybe Jamaat-e-Islami wants their person to head the caretaker government. So there is some kind of a unknown issue here, in the sense that who is going to head the caretaker government? This is the big worry, the cause of instability. That okay, former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has left. Now what? You need stability. You need, democracy. You need continued development. So for this, you must have a good interim government, as they are calling it, a good interim government who will, bring everything back on track, plan for elections, do all the things that are necessary, electoral roles, election commission's tasks, and so on and so forth. But that process will only start when an interim government is formed. It hasn't been formed yet.
So, as you rightly said, that the name of Muhammad Yunus is being thrown around as a possible interim prime minister. And you yourself said that he was the favorite of the Western governments. Statements have been made without going into veracity that he is the blue-eyed boy of the quote-unquote deep state, and his connections with the Western governments brings the issue of imperial interference in the internal politics of Bangladesh.
Well, again, a students' movement like this, which was a quota reform movement, which was supported by the prime minister of the country. So, to see that a movement like that has suddenly morphed into something quite different is certainly very, very surprising, very unusual, very unexpected. And it leads one to think that there was definitely something behind it. I have mentioned potential players. I cannot say, with any kind of definiteness as to what it was. I think, but I do know that even the interview that Professor Dr. Muhammad Yunus has given, he's talking only of the students and not talking of anybody else. Rather, he's even trying to blame India for some reason or the other. So I think that. There's so much uncertainty in Bangladesh today, so much uncertainty, so much instability, lack of clarity of what will go on next. But the only news that came today was the situation seems to be calm. So within Bangladesh, within Dhaka, it seems to be calm. But the news from outside Dhaka are not good at all, because we've seen attacks on homes, including of the minority Hindus. We've seen people losing their lives. And there's a lot of talk, feedback from people who have seen this firsthand, who've told me that, it reminds them of their parents, of what was happening in 1971 when people were being hanged. It reminded them of what happened, when I was there, 2003, 4, and 5. There were these the Jamaat al Mujahideen Bangladesh, people who had been in Afghanistan and had come back, and they used to do this. You kill people, you hang them on a tree, you broadcast their dying shrieks. It's terrible, and people say that that's what's happening now in the interior areas. Certainly, the minorities are in a great deal of worry, and they don't know about their own safety and how they can act. So much so that the army in Bangladesh has put out an advisory giving some telephone numbers. So if any of the minorities are facing problems, they can, they know this problem has started. They know this is happening. So it's a cause for concern. There was a visual today with the ISKCON in Chittagong, in Chattogram. They also say that they're in a very uncertain position. They don't know who to turn to for help.
The ISKCON Kali temple was attacked, and some of the media reports have come explicitly that minorities, specifically Hindus, are being targeted. And that is also reflected in the suo moto statement of External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar in Rajya Sabha. I read that statement, and there is explicit concern about the plight of Hindu minorities, Buddhist minorities, Chakmas, etc., under the current situation. So definitely it is not just quota reform movement. Definitely it was not anti-Sheikh Hasina movement. It has taken the turn of an anti-India movement.
Even while the movement is on, this predilection of the opposition forces, again Jamaat-e-Islami and BNP, to spread anti-Indianism has been on the rise in recent months. And I would say that in this term of Sheikh Hasina, it's been very much on the rise, very worrisome that you see, when you spread this kind of anti-Indianism, you're telling young people who do not know anything else, they don't know what is the reality, etc. But when you repeat a canard or a lie 25 times, and they tend to believe it. And I have seen, people have sent me WhatsApps that even when there was action on the streets of Dhaka, and the policemen were coming in and trying to prevent the rioting, people had morphed those visuals and saying that those policemen are speaking Hindi. They created such visuals trying to show that this is also being infiltrated from India. And so that those anti-Indianisms are very, very much on the rise. And I think with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina having stepped down, they would definitely be working on that with greater in a greater frenzy, I would say. It's worrisome, but there's only so much that one can do about it, because these are spread in a very insidious way, and from one person to another person, and you rarely see that. WhatsApp was one example, but that was it. So Dr. Mohammed Yunus is blaming India. He's blaming India, that why didn't you take care, why did you have a friend like Sheikh Hasina? Everything, whatever has gone wrong, is blamed on India. Now, I think we've seen that happen in Maldives, we've seen that happen certainly in Pakistan, and now in Bangladesh, and to some extent in Nepal. As a big neighbor, to some extent you you sort of learn to live with it. Like, I'm sure between America and, say, neighbors like Mexico, smaller countries, and other Latin American countries, you'll always have this kind of feeling coming up. But still, I think that we like to have friends in neighboring countries who understand us, and who can accept and can see that you should work out a mutually beneficial cooperation. you know Projects, all the projects that have been worked on in the last 10, 15 years, infrastructure projects, railway projects, friendship pipeline from north of, from Assam to Numaligarh in Assam to into the north of Bangladesh. That friendship pipeline brought in petroleum products from the north of India in our refineries in the Maligarh to the north of Bangladesh to save them the trouble of bringing petroleum products from the port in Chittagong all the way up by land, for the north. That's what they were doing all the time. But now this pipeline, really saves them a lot of money in transport. It saves them effort, and they are benefiting by getting the petroleum products at very reasonable and competitive prices. And then we had the Maitri vaccine, where we helped Bangladesh during the COVID with the vaccine. We have connectivity projects, we have water connectivity projects, we have port development projects, many power projects. We have a electricity exchange project between the grids of India and Bangladesh, where it's a very, very technically sophisticated exchange. You have to see the time of the day and so on and do the exchanges. All those are working very well. More than 1250 megawatts of power is going to Bangladesh through these various exchange
Coming
products.
back to Mr. Muhammad Yunus and his anti-India rhetoric and his animosity towards Sheikh Hasina, it does not subside, it does not end at that, because I saw some of his TV interviews and he's in total denial about attacks on minorities in Bangladesh, saying that did not happen, that is a canard, that is a pack of lies.
Yeah.
What do you comment on such a character?
Yeah, it's very difficult because when he's saying something did not happen, and everybody has seen the visuals, of the students accepting the thing of the situation calming down, but then suddenly going into complete overdrive and then becoming disastrous. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to say anything on that, except to try and put out the facts as it is, and to present the reality as we see it, and hope that people will recognize, that reality. Yeah.
So coming to the issue of foreign interference, we talked about possibility of China angle, possibility of Pakistan angle through Jamaat-e-Islami. What we have not talked about is a 800-pound gorilla, that is United States. We all know that United States was extremely critical of Sheikh Hasina for last several years. She was not invited to White House Summit of Democracy, while Pakistan, with very dubious democratic credentials, was invited. United States institutions that quote unquote monitor democracy abroad, State Department's institutions criticize the January elections in Bangladesh. Uh, there has been very lukewarm support to Sheikh Hasina and all this, military involvement by United States. They have not condemned the involvement of military in this, as to how you force a, democratically elected prime minister to leave the country in 45 minutes. So what is the US angle here?
Yes, I think that certainly whenever the name of Professor Dr. Muhammad Yunus has come up, it is always associated with the support he has from the Western countries, because that's the source of his support. That on the basis of which he received the Nobel Peace Prize, all that is very much taken on board. So, and even before the elections, as you've quite rightly mentioned, that there was great opposition to even the elections being held. But I would like to point out that as far as the election itself is concerned, the BNP, the principal opposition party, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, they chose not to participate. It was a deliberate decision on their part not to participate.
They knew
And
they were
then
not going to win.
after that, sorry,
They knew
yeah.
they were not going to win.
Yeah. So, they decided not to participate, and now they're saying it's non-participatory. The other political party, Jamaat-e-Islami, they were debarred from participation because of a judicial decision, not a decision by Sheikh Hasina, but a judicial decision, because their party has been disbarred because they do not recognize the constitution of Bangladesh as being superior to their constitution, which is the constitution of the political party. So I think the non-participating nature of the elections cannot be decided on this basis. Secondly, there were a lot of foreign observers who were in Bangladesh at the time of the elections. India was there, many other countries were there, and they all gave a clean chit. So I think that is a matter which is over and done with. But then after that, to try and change the government by other means, now that is something that is is worrisome to see it happen like this. So I think that we have to be very vary and see what it is that it is doing, because and I'm saying that we have to first see what happens there, the government, formation of government, running the government, having a normal relationship with all other countries of the world, and progressing the economy. I mean, again, the factories are closed, again the exporters are being impacted. So it is a very worrisome situation, but India is watching it very carefully, and India wants always stability, democracy, and continued development in Bangladesh. We are worried about the spillover into India, that the regional states of India along the border, we have a 4,000-kilometer border with Bangladesh. We are worried about that spilling over into India. And in fact, there was a curfew that had been declared along India's border on the Indian side for about 200 meters, to make sure that people do not try to come in and so on. So you can see that Indian government is very worried. They've been meetings at the highest level, all party meetings, statement in parliament, all that indicating how much importance we attach to what is happening in Bangladesh.
So, ma'am, Sheikh Hasina in January election won decisively, handsomely, more than two-thirds majority. Opposition chose to boycott despite several appeals. So she was a democratically elected prime minister de jure, de facto. And yet she is toppled by a motley crowd of hoodlums and lumpen elements of the society. And the Western media is calling actually transition to democracy. There was a similar example which happened in Ukraine, the Maidan Revolution. Viktor Yanukovych, democratically elected president of Ukraine, after a long struggle, after probably 3 tries in electoral arena, he became the president, and then he was toppled on the streets in Ukraine. And there is one common name comes in both these instances. And I'm not hesitant to take that common name, and that common name is Victoria Nuland. Victoria Nuland visited Bangladesh. Victoria Nuland also visited Ukraine prior to Maidan Revolution. And Victoria Nuland's unofficial title is regime change agent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do agree that the situation in Ukraine, what you're saying is right, because this is in Bangladesh. Many people have started calling it the Bengal Spring when it was going out of control, and they're calling it the Bengal Spring. It's absolutely an anomaly, because here you have people on the streets and killing and destroying. I mean, how much of Bangladesh's strategic civilian infrastructure has been destroyed, which was built up over the years under Sheikh Hasina's government, which is like the Bangladesh television building, the national data center, highways, expressways, flyovers, so many which just been destroyed. It's going to take more than a year just to rebuild that. Even the metro rail stations were destroyed. Metro had just come to Bangladesh very recently, and metro rail stations were completely vandalized. You wouldn't be able to function there for quite some time. So yes, you cannot call these as democratic events. Certainly not. I think certainly not. This kind of death and destruction cannot be called a democratic event. And I think that we are just watching to see what is going to happen in Bangladesh, what kind of stability is able to return to Bangladesh, or whether it will. It's a very, very worrisome point.
A couple of months ago, Sheikh Hasina had alleged that a particular Western country wanted a base in St. Martin Island. And that particular country was trying to carve out an independent nation from some areas in Bangladesh and Myanmar. Was she right? Was she prescient in bringing that out?
Well, I mean, the background one at that time when she made it, it created a big stir. But whether she was referring to the Western countries, but the talk of parts of Bangladesh, being carved off. The one is for the Rohingyas, one is for others. This has been around for some time, and obviously Sheikh Hasina had not been supporting it at all, and she'd been asking for in every possible way to get the Rohingyas to go back to Bangladesh, and now they're talking of some Christian territory, being carved out. So I think that those, and I think that was one set of countries she spoke about. Then I think that because Sheikh Hasina, when she came to India, she had a very good meeting, bilateral visit with Prime Minister Modi, and there are some very important decisions, including on the Indo-Pacific. And the Bangladesh government themselves had brought out, I think last year, a white paper on the Indo-Pacific outlook, and a very good paper, showing that they're interested. They recognize the importance of the maritime part of their country. India and Bangladesh have sorted out their maritime border problems. There's no problem there at all. And Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had spoken very often about the blue economy, about the economy of the maritime part of the country and how to develop that and bring prosperity to fishermen and others through that. And of course, something where India and Bangladesh could work together a lot. So I think that this part of her statement on the Indo-Pacific, and especially she had agreed with Prime Minister Modi that there could be a initiative on maritime security, and they were prepared to participate in it. This probably annoyed China enormously, because they had earlier, even when the earlier paper on Indo-Pacific had come out, the Chinese ambassador in Dhaka had made a strong statement about it. So I think that her independent foreign policy, she always spoke about friendship to all, malice towards none. Her independent foreign policy did not please many people, many countries, I would say, and may have been the reason why they many for different reasons different countries wanted her to go. I mean, Pakistan has always, for the last 52 years, had maintained the strong links with Jamaat-e-Islami, and even other Islamic fundamentalist groups like Hifadhul Islam and others, where Sheikh Hasina had tried to reach out to them. Even they were, taken over by the hardliners. Very difficult. So one realizes that the situation is going to take some time to come back to normal. We are watching it very carefully. We will, of course, be in touch with the army chief who is now in charge. But if there's an interim government, then the army is no longer in charge. But we do not know when that interim government will come. So it is a matter of deep concern, and we hope that it will settle down very quickly.
Now, talking about the future and setting up an interim government, names of all the political parties have been mentioned except for Awami League. What does that tell you?
Well, today morning, Mohammad Shahabuddin, the president of Bangladesh, he did make a statement that he's hoping that an interim government will represent all parts. Maybe that could be another point under discussion, because there's always been also a talk of many of the people who had opposed former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had talked of a national unity government, bringing all the parties together and then deciding what kind of election. And we have to remember that Awami League is a cadre-based party. There are only two cadre-based parties in Bangladesh, the Awami League and the Jamaat-e-Islami. So they have a strong cadre, grassroots spread out in the villages, and they do have some 35 to 40% of the vote, of the popular vote is theirs. But so does the BNP. So, it's what will happen to this Awami League grassroots support? How will it develop? How will it pan out? These are all matters to be watched. And certainly, I think you cannot ignore a party which has such a large cadre-based support. So the other leaders in the party, I'm sure they must be, but I know that to tell you again that how it possibly could not be a student-based revolt anymore or movement anymore, is that the people who were bringing down the statue of Sheikh Mujib are also destroying the homes of all the ministers of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's government. So it's a very targeted political party based attack, and I do not see the students who were on the same page with Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who, she had supported them. She went all the way to the Supreme Court. So I do not see them as being the ones who are destroying these homes. And that again they're causing the people to leave their homes, to run away, greedy live uncertainty, and one is very worried about it.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Sikri, for your participation in this discussion. We hope that especially the army as an institution in Bangladesh, does not show its greed for power as it has shown in the past. After every military coup, army has held up to governing the country in the name of democratic reform. We hope that does not happen. We hope people of Bangladesh are allowed to exercise their free choice without any coercion and foreign interference. It appears that there's definitely foreign interference, and the students' demands or students' agitation was hijacked by foreign sponsored agents that toppled the government just like they toppled the democratically elected presidency of Viktor Yanukovych prior to the Maidan Revolution. We hope that large countries will stop interfering in the internal affairs of Bangladesh, be that China, be that Pakistan, be that Western countries. But we hope that this situation of instability is brought to normalcy and an honorable solution is found because Sheikh Hasina did a lot for Bangladesh, for its economic prosperity, for development, and everything that country is at this point in time instead of being a basket case. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.